The story begins with a countdown, as we are 439 days and 19 hours away until a mysterious event. With time ticking, an extraterrestrial signal from outer space flashes up on the servers at NASA. As more people get involved, they all draw the same unspoken conclusion. This is coming from 600 years away, and one of the men seems to understand what this code is. Fast forward to 71 days and 13 hours left, and we catch up with Carol Sturka. She's a novelist and attending an event. While Carol's fans adore her work, Carol herself sees it as mindless crap. She's with her partner Helen. We jump to 29 days and 23 hours. A couple of lab scientists are testing mice, but when one of them plays dead, Jen opens up the cage to check for a heartbeat. Unfortunately, it bites her and Jen immediately begins seizing. Her partner throws her into decontamination, but it's no good. It seems like she's been infected with an unknown virus. This virus appears to spread through kissing, and it doesn't take long for the entire lab to be contaminated. Eerily, the men and women silently work in sync, taking mouth swabs and petri dishes. Jen even licks every donut out in the foyer to make sure this virus spreads further. In the next scene, we are 3 hours out from the big main event. Carol and Helen head to the bar, where Carol ruminates over whether to ditch her trashy fiction and work on her serious book instead. Heading outside for a smoke, Carol notices all the plane trails up in the air, running parallel and in sync. What she's unaware of is that the airbase nearby is on lockdown. She's snapped out of her chat by a guy getting into his pickup and immediately crashing in the parking lot. Unfortunately, Helen also winds up infected, and it doesn't take long for Carol to realize this is widespread. Inside the bar, everyone is seizing, and Carol appears to be the only one unaffected. She takes a pickup, loads Helen in the back, and watches in horror as she overlooks the city on fire. Everybody is facing the same issue, and the only person through all of this that's not affected happens to be Carol. When Helen passes away, everybody else in the general area suddenly snaps out of their trance and confronts Carol. One of the doctors tries to kiss her, which doesn't seem to work in spreading the virus, and when they all say in unison, "We just want to help Carol," she grabs the pickup and takes off. As she drives, people work together to put out the fires, but they also watch Carol too. Some even walk in the same direction as her stolen pickup. Carol manages to keep it together long enough to drive back home, where two of her neighbor's children speak together and tell her where her spare key is. Inside her house, Carol watches as the entranced masses load up the deceased into a truck. Turning on the TV, the only message on the news happens to be one directed at Carol, telling her to give a call whenever she's ready. Pouring herself a glass of Dutch courage, Carol manages to speak to the senior-most official in the government, who tells her that she's safe and should stay at home for the next few days. Apparently, these guys are beneficiaries of extraterrestrial technology. 14 months ago, this radio signal was detected, as we know, but it turns out the signal is actually a recipe which was recreated in a lab. This psychic glue bound everyone together as one hive mind. Apparently, there are 11 individuals in total that have been unaffected by this around the globe, and the collective wants her to join them. In Morocco, an extended montage shows the cleanup operations in progress. A woman who appears to be part of the collective joined helps remove a body from a vehicle, then gets onto a moped, travels to the airport, and flies a plane. After she lands in Albuquerque, she removes her clothes and steps into the shower, where other collective members bow and attend to her. The time now stands at 11 hours and 26 minutes past the world becoming a collective whole. Carol awakens from a drunken state and slowly accepts this new reality. She mourns for Helen, covering her with an old blanket and eventually digging into the earth to bury her. It proves demanding, exhausting work because hard rock litters the soil. Carol is being watched from an Air Force drone 40,000 feet above and nearing heat exhaustion after digging for 2 hours straight. She's approached by a neighbor carrying a bottle of water. Carol pours the bottle out onto the lawn to make a point, but realizes that the woman they've sent to see her is the exact image of her character, Raven, the gender-swapped version at least. Clearly, this is the original concept for the character, but because Helen was part of this collective before dying, all of her unique memories now belong to the joined. When Carol erupts and shouts at Zozia in the street, she suddenly collapses to the ground. This appears to impact everyone else in the collective as well, who become temporarily docile. Carol's negative emotions seem to affect the collective as they find them difficult to endure. However, the consequence of this is that their brief freezing results in millions around the globe dying. This proves challenging for Carol to accept naturally, as she's on the verge of collapsing after throwing up. She eventually recovers her strength thanks to a mini digger being delivered from a helicopter to help dig through the volcanic rock in the garden. Zozia also discloses here that there's actually one more person who's awake, as the collective has found a man in Paraguay who is awakened. Carol wants to meet the other people who are like her, and that requires boarding an empty plane bound for Bilbao, where this gathering is scheduled to take place. Interestingly enough, Carol decides to sit far back in economy. The time now stands at 2 days and 2 hours since the collective has taken control, and Carol meets the 5 other individuals who can speak English at the airport. It's an awkward encounter, but these are Kshu Mai, Kuzumeyu, Laxmi, and Akinbayer. Each has family members with them who are part of the collective. The 5th person is a man from Mauritania. This is Komba Diabate, and he arrives in the president's plane. He's clearly taking full advantage of this luxury accommodation, and he even has a group of women present too. Carol is the only one who isn't especially excited by what's happening and arranges a meeting for only those not part of the collective. She wants to try to restore the world and save it. However, it turns out Laxmi's grandfather died during Carol's small anger explosion, so they're not especially in a forgiving mood. She thinks Carol should educate herself about what the collective is really like. Others also share their perspectives too, with charismatic Kumba pointing out that racism has disappeared, all the animals have been released from the zoos, and there's absolutely zero crime across the planet now. Notably, the collective does not kill, nor will they even contemplate killing living creatures either. The collective is vegetarian. Eventually, Carol has heard enough and yells at the collective following a failed attempt to reach Laxmi. However, it causes all of them to become entranced again. The time now stands at 2 days and 16 hours past the event, and Carol wakes, thinking about her explosion. Zojia and the other collective members don't have anything to stop her anger, and after they watch their own family members seizing because of Carol, everyone is left except for Kumba. However, the main reason he's there is because Kumba wants Carol's permission to sleep with Zojia. Carol wants Zojia to think for herself, which naturally is easier said than done. However, there's a spark, a brief moment, where Zojia seems to want to decide for herself. Carol eventually leaves and goes her own way from the others, reboarding the original plane and flying economy. She clearly doesn't see things the same way they do. Zojia goes with Kumba, but there's a moment when the two lock eyes, and it's enough to convince Carol. Right before they leave, though, Carol reconsiders and joins the others. In the next scene, we see 17 days before the virus spreads across the world. In the past, Carol and Helen decide to stay in an ice palace up in Norway. While Helen finds it stunning and feels quite joyful about the whole experience, Carol does not. However, she can recognize some of the beauty, at least as she and Helen sit together and observe the northern lights through the window. Back in the present, it's 3 days and 3 hours past the collective taking over humanity. Carol travels in economy, but Zojia is here too. Captain John McConnell is flying, which I guess represents an improvement over the girl from TGI Friday's last episode. Carol feels frustrated over the lack of experts in the scientific field outside of the collective. She is, of course, desperate to try and discover a cure to whatever this thing is. After obtaining the information on the different survivors, she also learns a little more about the guy from Paraguay. This is Manusos, and he operates a self-storage facility. He hasn't really communicated with the collective, and given he only speaks Spanish and is keeping himself off the radar, Carol decides she wants to speak to him. It doesn't go well, and after he rudely shouts at her down the phone, Carol calls back and does the same. With this meeting a failure, Carol gets dropped off back home again. She leaves Zojia behind, who hands over all the mail in transit. There's a package here which happens to be a massage gun. Helen ordered this for Carol given how stressed she's been on the tour. When she calls Zojia and questions her about the present, Carol orders her to forget about Helen and erase all memories. It's now 4 days and 12 hours post the collective takeover, and in the morning, food is delivered to Carol's door. She throws it away, stubbornly sticking to what she knows, and demanding that the collective leave her alone. When she arrives at the supermarket, she finds the place completely empty. It turns out the collective is consolidating resources to centralize useful items for distribution. Carol is quick to call the collective, letting them know that she's an independent person, and calling them all the time doesn't work for her. She'd rather just do her shopping like a normal person. Just like that, a whole bunch of trucks arrive, along with dozens of people who work together to restock the supermarket. It doesn't take long for everything to be back to how it was before. Alone, Carol does her shopping but amusingly ends up with a microwavable meal for dinner that night. Midway through watching TV, all the lights suddenly go out across the town. It's here we learn that the collective is also trying to save electricity and lighting too, cutting Carol's house from the grid. Zojia explains here that none of the collective is working at night, and given there's no crime either, there's no reason to keep them on. When Carol lashes out and tells Zojia to bring a hand grenade over, she does just that. It's a bit of dark humor that actually breaks Carol's wall a little, so she invites Zojia in for a drink. The joint don't know how long it'll take to find a cure for her, but Carol laughs at the unclear time frame. All of humanity is in this room and nobody knows anything. This leads her to bring up the uniqueness of humanity and how this leads to unique lives and experiences. When Carol starts mentioning a few, Zosha softly interrupts about Carol's experience with Helen in the Arctic. Carol is not happy. She grabs the hand grenade and pulls the pin. Zosha grabs it and throws it out the window, jumping on Carol to protect her just as it explodes. Carol is shocked that this was a real grenade. Zosha is badly burned and rushed to the hospital. She has a concussion and she's resting at the hospital, but Carol is worried and more than a little confused. Given the collective was willing to give her a live hand grenade, she goes over the moral implications of various other weapons, all the way up to nuclear bombs. Apparently, the collective is willing about giving her one, but it does raise a very interesting question. We get a glimpse of Manussos. He's alone, away from the joint, and attempting to find a radio signal to confirm that there are others out there like him. Running low on food, the collective stops by with a plate of food, but like Carol, he's unwilling to take anything from them. In fact, he uses a crowbar to knock the plate over. Supplies are getting scarce though, and no amount of searching through the other self-storage units can make up for that. When the phone rings, we see his view from Carol calling from the plane. When she swears at him and hangs up, it works to push him on to find out more about her. It's 7 days and 8 hours out from the collective takeover, and Carol leaves the hospital and takes the cop car parked outside. She drives back home, where she's shocked to discover a whole bunch of people have worked continuously to help fix the place up. It's as if the hole was never there. When she pushes them out of the area, Carol heads into her office and writes down what she knows about the joint so far, with different rules including how they're always truthful and willing to please her. Wanting to try and learn more, she brings in one of the joint from outside, a guy by the name of Larry. He quotes parts from her books and compares them to that of Shakespeare. Of course, that's not the same feeling shared by everyone, but one of her devoted fans, Crazy Moira, was on the edge of committing suicide until she read Carol's book. This is why it touches her so deeply and why it's changed the joint's view. As for Helen though, she thought Carol's books were like cotton candy. She was thankful for the life they built together through selling this crowd pleaser. Her unpublished novel though is a different matter. Helen wasn't a fan of her work but talked to Val and agreed to get this published because it would make Carol happy. It also wouldn't hurt her career either, so no harm, no foul. It's a hard pill to swallow, and she eventually pushes Larry out the room. This confirms one thing: the joint can't lie. Carol shows up to see Zosha in the hospital and directly asks if the joint can be reversed. It appears that it can be, and this gives Carol ammunition to set to work and do just that. Carol breaks into the hospital lab and takes a whole bunch of equipment. The joint give her some heroin when she asks for it, but in reality, she uses sodium thiopental to create a serum to loosen Zosha's lips. She tests it on herself in a really funny scene before arriving to see Zosha in hospital. Injecting Zosha's IV with the sodium thiopental, Carol takes Zosha outside, and as soon as it kicks in, she demands to know how to put things back to how they were. However, it doesn't take long for others to catch on to what she's done. Handcuffing herself to Zosha when the joints surround her in a tight circle, Carol tries to get an answer, but the crowd chants, "Please, Carol," over and over again. Zosha gets a heart attack. Shocked by what's happened, Carol lets the others work to bring her back. At the hospital, Carol receives a call from Laxmi. She tears into Carol for making everybody cry and questions whether she's mentally unsound. Unfortunately, Carol's attempts to talk to her about what she's discovered about the joint fall on deaf ears. For now, Zosha is resting and recovering from her cardiac arrest. Carol hangs around the hospital, sleeping, while the joint walk out the hospital in unison. Time passes and Carol wakes to find the place empty. Zosha is also gone too, and a recording on the phone confirms that the joint are here for her, but they need a little space for the time being. Carol heads up to the rooftop and observes that the joint are all leaving en masse in both directions out the city. She's left all on her own as we reach day 8 in 22 hours since the joint. Carol drives home and sets up her camcorder again. This time, she leaves a message for the rest of the survivors, confirming that they can turn the joint back into individuals. She wants them to work together to find a solution, but whether anyone will actually listen or not is another matter. After recording her video, Carol drops the video outside in a package at the end of her driveway. She also leaves a voice note for the joint, telling them to pick up the parcel and make a copy of it to send to the other 12 survivors. The joint don't send anyone personally, but a drone does hover over and grab it. Without anyone around, it does allow wild animals, namely dogs, to start rummaging through her trash. In the morning, Carol sorts out the trash, but this time the drone gets stuck on the lamppost, prompting Carol to head deeper into town to sort this out. However, in doing so, she realizes that the trash is full of empty containers of milk. At the local dairy farm, she finds evidence that the joint has been using this factory to create some sort of mixture to help them function. They seem to have mixed water with a strange white powder. She doesn't know what it is, and with nobody to talk with, she deduces that the pH level is 7, but beyond that, there's not much else to go on. It also finally hits her that she's all alone. A whole pack of wolves show up at Carol's place scavenging for food. They begin digging outside, right where Helen was buried. Carol does her best to stop them, and she eventually drives the cop car, with the sirens blasting, right into the garden to scare them away. She even sleeps in the car too. Realizing she can't leave the grave like this, Carol works to move a whole bunch of slabs to cover the grave. She works tirelessly through the day before focusing on this strange white powder. She traces the packet all the way back to a warehouse called Agrijet. Carol breaks into the huge freezer here, where she finds all the food being stockpiled. However, it's not just food being kept here. Carol lifts up a white tarp on the shelves and is shocked by what she's seen. Carol grabs her camcorder, determined to film it for evidence. Bracing herself, she heads back inside. There are shrink-wrapped items on either side of the shelves that happen to contain severed body parts. The whole place is filled with these parts, vacuum-sealed and ready to be consumed. The joint are using a meat grinder to process the bodies and then turning that into sustenance. There's a slick bit of editing here as Carol ends up back home again. She packs up her things, and instead of having the drone send the video over, she's going to give it a personal touch this time. Mr. Diabate is busy cosplaying James Bond's Casino Royale, and when the card game is up, the joint works silently to clean up the mess. Diabate is right in the heart of Las Vegas, living the high life. After getting comfortable with a whole bunch of women in a hot tub, Carol shows up. She's guided to the Westgate Hotel, where Diabate is here waiting for her. He's actually seen Carol's old videos, and she's quite surprised that the joint are comfortable with showing him this. However, she's even more taken aback when Diabate has already figured out the joint are eating people. Sure, it's disturbing, but to help ease her mind, he has a video of his own to show her. With John Cena in the role of narration, he explains that the liquid the joint has been drinking is mostly stockpile foodstuffs that are close to spoiling. They also include 12% of what they're calling HTP, known as human-derived protein. 100,000 people pass away each day due to natural causes and accidents. Instead of leaving these remains to waste or for the animals to get at, they're using this as their source of HTP. Turns out Diabate and John Cena have been hanging out a lot recently, and a week back he actually directly asked about the milk. All the other survivors are also aware of this, and they share Diabate's nonchalance. If that wasn't enough, the joint are likely to die within a decade if they don't sort their food out, so the HDP argument is a good one, at least from their perspective. When Carol finds out about the schmoozing and closeness of the others, she realizes how very alone she is. Nobody else shares her concerns, and it's difficult to take. When Carol leaves in the morning, Diabate drops another bombshell. The joint can't turn people unless they willingly consent to it. This virus is tailored to individual stem cells, but to obtain those they must first collect them from their bodies. It's a very invasive procedure, and they only just discovered this yesterday. Diabate is not consenting to this, and Carol is quite quick to make her thoughts felt too. There's no way she's consenting to this. At this point, we cut back to 9 days and 18 hours post-joined. Manousos checks out the radio signals and seems close to giving up. Every channel seems to bring back static, but one does not. He's marked something with a question mark, and it seems to be giving off a strange static signal. That night, Manousos receives the tape from Carol, and it inspires him to leave. As he does, all the lights in town suddenly come back on. He heads back to his apartment, packs his things, and heads out. His car stalls, so he's forced to go it on foot. His mother shows up, and he ignores her. He wheels the car down the hill and jump-starts it, sending him on his way. Carol stops to get some gas en route back home. She makes another request to get a red Gatorade, but while the drone is busy, she stocks up the car with a bunch of fireworks. We are 12 days and 20 hours post the joint, and Carol is back home again. She starts setting off some fireworks before joining the cacophony of wolves howling. After a golfing session, Carol switches cars when the police cruiser fails to start. She heads out for Jeem's Hot Springs next, before enjoying some artwork at the local gallery, singing the whole time. That night, Carol decides to dine out someplace special, celebrating her and Helen's anniversary with a bunch of dishes from various years. Meanwhile, Manousos is en route to meet Carol. The joint want to try and help, stopping by to offer a lift, but he ignores them completely and finds nearby cars to siphon fuel. He's completely self-reliant here and refuses to even engage them. He's actually taking up English lessons too, trying to learn the same language so he can communicate with Carol. Eventually, Manousos is forced to go it by foot when the dense jungle looms ahead. It's dangerous, and the joint are quick to step in. They want to help get him to Carol, but Manousos is having none of it. He tells them that all they have is stolen and they can have nothing. With that, Manousos burns his car and sets off in the jungle alone, continuing his mantra of learning English the whole time. Unfortunately, he winds up hurting his back, pricking himself on spiky thorns. Manousos cauterizes the wounds and continues to wander through the jungle until it becomes too much. He collapses on the ground and looks close to passing out. A helicopter stops by though, and someone rappels down to pick him up. We are now 48 days and 16 hours post-joined. Carol continues to set off a bunch of fireworks and play golf back home. She's starting to lose faith completely, and she's no longer singing either. Zojia shows up in the morning and Carol immediately staggers forward and throws her arms around her, sobbing. Turns out earlier on she got some paint and wrote the words "come back" on the ground. Manousos wakes up in hospital, and he's not happy with the joint taking him from the jungle, so he holds the doctor up at knife point and heads out into reception. Manousos doesn't want freebies and asks for a receipt for the hospital fees. He also adds an ambulance to the bill too. He soon leaves the hospital, reinvigorated when he learns he's in Panama. Meanwhile, Carol makes a drink for Zojia, but things are super awkward between them. They eventually decide to play some card games, but Carol has been starved of any sort of social interactions, so she's not quite sure how to play this. All the rest of the joint are back in town now too, and Zojia explains that they don't believe in ownership. Everything is shared and they all sleep together under one roof, which happens to be a stadium nearby. They obviously don't kill animals like we already knew, but they also don't shoo an animal away either. When pets become attached to their owners, they stay by their side and the joint look after them. Carol even sleeps alongside them that night too. Now, it becomes clear that her way of finding out information is to use a much softer touch, and it works perfectly. Not only does Carol learn that trains are used to transport food around the country, she also learns that whatever individuals feel, the hive mind also picks up on this. The joint are actually building a giant antenna and intend to use all the power in the world to send a signal to Kepler. This explains those blackouts and why all the power at Carol's has been taken off the central grid. This planet is actually 640 light-years from Earth, but the joint, like a virus, are determined to spread as vast as they possibly can. So when they're done with our planet, they'll focus on other planets next. It's a clever ruse, and Carol continues this charade the next day. After playing croquet with Zojia, Carol is invited out to an old diner that's been renovated and patched back up again. It actually burnt down in a fire, so they've remodeled the whole thing just for her. This is pretty overwhelming for Carol, given the place is where she used to cut her teeth writing. She gushes about how she used to work, and she's shocked that the joint have built it back up again. However, in the middle of everything, Carol leaves the diner silently and heads back home again. When Zojia heads back, Carol confronts her. She knows all of this is a ruse to distract her. Zojia eventually admits that yes, they are aware that she hasn't given up on finding a way to stop them. Carol is vulnerable and admits that she'll do everything she can, even if it means being on her own again. Just like that, Zojia leans forward and kisses her. The pair do sleep together, and in the morning Carol is actually working, writing away on her typewriter. She's decided to switch her protagonist, Ray-Ban, over to a woman now. The duo gush over the book's plots and even cook food together. However, Zojia realizes that Carol's world is about to be changed forever, given Manousos is almost there. A package transfers from a plane, across the trails, and to a small village. The villagers all begin chanting and singing as a metal tin is given to Kuzumayu, the girl there. She breathes in the fumes and immediately starts convulsing, collapsing on the ground. The experiment is a success and Kuzumayu becomes one of the joined. We then cut across to 60 days and 16 hours post-joined. Zojia and Carol watch as Manousos is inbound to the latter's house. The joined believe he may have seen her first video and seen it as a rallying call. Carol intends to just hear him out then send the guy on his way, but Zojia is concerned. She and the other joined think he may be dangerous. This immediately gets Carol's gut feeling tingling when he shows up. She demands he keep his machete behind, and the pair disagree over where to talk. Manousos obviously doesn't trust her and Carol doesn't trust him either. Eventually they compromise and talk out in the back garden. They disagree over the joint, with Carol obviously having softened over them, but still very much intending to find a solution here. Manousos, though, sees them as outright evil. He wants them all completely destroyed and killed if need be. Manousos challenges Carol, bringing up how she was left alone for 40 days. Interestingly, she doesn't tell him why they're back. Manousos doesn't trust anyone or anything, and even more so when he heads inside Carol's house. He thinks the place is bugged and begins looking everywhere. Eventually he finds a sensor, which happens to be Helen's doing to keep an eye on Carol's alcoholism. When he's dropped off at the adjacent house for the night, Manousos learns that Carol has been talking to the joined. He wants to figure out the gaps and rings through to them himself, demanding to talk to Zojia. When Carol finds out, she's annoyed and rushes over to confront the pair of them. She's bitterly jealous, especially when Zojia points out that they love Manousos as much as Carol. When she suddenly begins seizing, Carol realizes this is Manuso's doing. Turns out he's conducting an experiment on another of the joined. When they begin seizing, Manusos grabs his radio and turns it to the strange signal. It's clear Manusos is trying to save the joined and bring them back one at a time. It almost works, but Carol interferes and comes brandishing a shotgun, forcing him to stop. However, because of Manusos and how dangerous he is for the joined, they all up and leave once again. Manusos doesn't care though, believing he stumbled upon the solution to save the joined. Carol, though, refuses to join him and eventually drives off, joining Zozia. Carol and Zozia hang out together and have a good time up at a ski resort together. They talk about the unjoined Zozia and how she had someone a long time ago, but she's no longer in this body. Carol is genuinely happy, perhaps more so than she was with Helen, given the contrast to her trip to the igloos. However, Carol learns that the joined now have a way of getting her stem cells that doesn't require an invasive procedure to make her one of them. Zozia and the other joined have the eggs she froze with Helen. The joined are now working on these tirelessly to make her part of their collective. She has a month until the joined are able to do this and make her one of them. Carol, though, is not happy. In the meantime, Manusos continues to work and try to find a solution, believing the radio signal holds the clue. However, a helicopter flies over outside, dropping a steel container down. Zozia is there too, given she's piloting the thing, and having dropped Carol off, she finally decides to join Manusos and save the world. And we discover that the metal container holds an atom bomb inside.